Good morning. Here we are with just a minute or so to go before we begin. And welcome. Hello. This is not a formal or official beginning, but if you're there, do say hi in the chat. My first question, of course, is Graham, always good to see you. Am I audible? Everything okay? Is all that working? Hello, School of Philosophy and Economic Science. Cool and bright winter's morning in Linlithgow. It's sort of, we've got a sort of pale cast to the sky, which could be blue or grey. It's very difficult to tell at this point, but I'm hoping it will be one of those lovely late autumn, early winter, sunny days. So a few seconds to go. We're loud and clear, which is fantastic. Good morning, Jan. Well, good, we'll begin. So, good morning. My name is Robin Mukherjee. I'm a student at the School of Philosophy and Economic Science. In early November, just a few weeks ago, I found myself contemplating a rather impressive work of art called The Family of Man by the sculptor Barbara Hepworth. You may know it. This was in the Snape Maltings near Aldborough in Suffolk. And when I say contemplating, I use the term loosely, perhaps more interacting. I'm sure I'm not the first person ever to poke their face through the aperture, or even, and believe me, it gets worse. Well, you know, the things we do in the morning. I have, in the moment, I have to say it felt perfectly natural, having stared at it for a while, to make contact. And having made contact, walking around it, running my hand over its surfaces, taking silly photos, I began to sense its presence, not so much as a visual entity, but as a three-dimensional object in space. And with that sense came the feeling that I too, at least physically, am a three-dimensional object in space. And so there we were, two objects in space, interacting, communicating, responding to each other, which I admit may sound a bit fanciful. Surely the sculptural piece, a static thing, isn't responding. But of course it is. It's not a static thing at all. It changes with the light, with the tilt of one's head as one's shadow passes across it, and it changes as we see it a little differently, a little more closely or contextually, vaguely or precisely, as we understand it more. Hepworth said that vision is not sight, but the perception of the mind, the discernment of the reality of life, as she puts it. The eye takes in light, obviously, but the image is within, and it is within this tension between the outward landscape and our awareness of it that the sculpture sits. But it was only when I was walking away and happened to glance back, the mind unprepared, if you like, that I suddenly recognized another dimension to the work. For a moment, there was no distinction between the sculpture and its setting, or the sculpture, its setting, and me. And I think I got a glimpse of what Barbara Hepworth was referring to, what she also called an ancient response. For a moment, I wasn't just a tourist visiting some old friends draped in all the details of personal history and circumstance. Hepworth said that in her work, she hoped to give the viewer a feeling of infinity, what might be, well, what that might be the word I'm struggling for. Whatever it was, I can recall it now, I can feel it now, and this surely is what great works of art bring to us, or brings us to. A feeling, if I can be ground for a moment, of ourselves as a part of the eternal continuity of life. Just sharing this with you. The sculpture, here we are, in Snape Maltings, as you can see, consists of three figures named as Ancestor 1, Ancestor 2, and Parent. They're part of a 9-piece set of figures, the others being young girl, youth bride, bridegroom, another parent, and ultimate form. They were cast several times, and you can find them in various parts of the world. The only place where you can see all 9 figures together is in the Yorkshire Sculpture Park near Wakefield, where Hepworth was born. Her original conception for the work came about at the time of the Spanish Civil War. An early version was destroyed in the Second World War. She finally got back to it in the 70s, feeling again that a statement needed to be made about mankind's relationship to itself and to the world. At one level, these are stages in our own life, from youth to advanced years, with the final totemic form to represent the vital spirit, not a god, said Hepworth, but something within us. One thinks of Shakespeare's Seven Ages of Man, and of course it is the map of all our lives, all the possibilities of life with all its variations. There's no one route, but there is life itself. And this is what the work reflects, that there is within the existence of us all an experience shared with all others. And importantly to Hepworth, an experience that is as ancient as the landscape in which we stand. When she was 7 years old, the headmistress of her school presented a slideshow on Egyptian art. And for Hepworth, as she put it, that was it. She was going to sculpt. Somebody once asked her what she might have been if she hadn't been a sculptor, and she said, maybe a surgeon. Have you seen the head of a femur? She said, it's like Exeter Cathedral. To be an artist clearly wasn't a choice. According to Hepworth, a sculptor carves because he must, a statement as sculptural as anything chiseled in stone, essential and elegant, its meaning, as you would expect, as much in the form as it is in the words. Her father was a county surveyor who, when she got a bit older, began to take her on his rounds. He travelled a bit. And this is when she experienced what she called deep, true landscape, the real source, she said, of man's energy. Every hill and valley, she said, became a sculpture in my eyes. And she became aware of a tension between the land and man, marveling at how an industrial town, which she described as stunted, graceless houses, dominated by the structure of mills, works yards, mines, slag heaps, and warehouses, noise, dirt, and smell, could spring out of the inner beauty of the land. She believed this to be one of the basic impulses of sculpture, how the human being comes to terms with matter, material, form, and substance. She went to Leeds School of Art, where she met Henry Moore, and then to the Royal College of Art, from whom she won a grant to travel to Italy, where, of course, she discovered light. And she wrote about this light as that which, here we go, transforms and reveals, which intensifies the subtleties of form and contours and colour, and in which darkness, the darkness of window, door, or arch, is set as an altogether new and tangible object. She married her travelling companion, fellow artist John Skeeping, and later she met and married the abstract painter Ben Nicholson. As she continued to work, so she began to move further away from the figurative and closer to abstraction. And now I have to confess that for a long time I didn't get her work. And it's partly because I'd never really seen it except in passing or in photographs, and partly because I just didn't get abstract. Until that is, I visited Henry Moore's house, which is run by the Henry Moore Foundation in Hertfordshire. The studio looks like he just popped out to the garden. It's full of materials, half-made objects, studies, ideas and things, all manner of things, pebbles, rocks, shells, wood, natural objects of all kinds. And really, who doesn't have on their desk or on a shelf somewhere something that they picked up and kept and glanced at now and again? And why? Well, because it speaks to something, doesn't it? Its shape, colour, texture, where it was found, the weather that day, our feelings that day, the principles of physics and geometry and number without which it couldn't exist. Hepworth said that, and I'll put a slide up. Looking out of a window or walking down the road, it is impossible not to be aware of form and colour. To which I have to say, not for me, it isn't. I can cheerfully, or not cheerfully, look out of my window or walk down the road and see nothing but the interior canvas of my own concerns. But to the sculptor, everything, it would seem, is sculpture. So you can kick a stone or stub your toe on it, or you can pick it up, contemplate the eternal principles by which it's been shaped, what Hepworth called the form behind the form, and ask yourself how it came to be. She moved to Cornwall, St Ives, in 1939 and remained there until her death in 1975. The landscape reminded her of Yorkshire, and she took inspiration from it, making, as she said, sculptures which will affirm and reaffirm the magic of the will of life and the miracle of rebirth and continuity in the universe. It was a grand vision, rooted in the world around her. On another occasion, she said that one has to go on reminding oneself forever and ever and ever but the world is a tremendous spread in time, something beyond one's comprehension. Shortly after my visit to Snape, I was speaking to a friend who described walking through gardens and seeing a hawk swooping across the lawn. A few minutes later, she came across a sculpture. This was Waterbury House. It wasn't the Hepworth. The Waterbury House is owned by the School of Philosophy and Economic Science near Oxford. And she said that she saw the same laws in the sculpture as she'd seen in the flight of the hawk, the same principles, harmonies, and tensions. And they were saying the same thing, something beyond words, perhaps that feeling of infinity Hepworth spoke of. If this is all that a sculpture does for us, surely it does enough. There is so much more to be said on the subject, obviously, but the time is limited. I thoroughly recommend Hepworth's collected writings on sculpture, art, and creativity. It is a work of sublime philosophy. And do find some sculpture, whether it's a piece of Hepworth or anyone else, or a stone that you've just kicked with your toe, and let it speak to you. You never know what it might say. Thank you for joining us this morning. Philosophy Live is here on Fridays. Have a very good day. Find sculpture, find a stone, and see you again. Bye. Well, nice to see you, Graham, you too, and Nick. Yes. Well, thanks for your company, and see you again.